What is going on, everybody? I am back today to do another video that is similar to some videos that I have released this year where I have read a book and I have talked about a film that the book is based on. And I've had a lot of fun doing that. I talked about The Shining, Carrie, A Clockwork Orange, Misery, and it's a lot of fun when you read a work of literature to see how it is translated into movie form, because for the most part you would assume you have the entire framework to create a great piece of film. And today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite books I've read this year, which is Stephen King's Pet Sematary. And after reading the book, I was very excited to visit the original film. I didn't watch the 2019 film. I plan on visiting it at some point, but I thought it would be really interesting to talk about the original film based on the book. So today we're going to be discussing Pet Sematary. Pet Sematary is written by Stephen King and the film is directed by Mary Lambert. Dr. Lewis Creed's family moves into the country house of their dreams and discovers a pet cemetery at the back of their property. A cursed burial ground deep in the woods brings the dead back to life with minor problems. At first, only the family's cat makes the return trip, but an accident forces a heartbroken father to contemplate the unthinkable. So this is one of the films in like the horror canon that I feel like is discussed a lot that I have never seen in my life. This was my very first time ever watching this movie. And early this year, I've been really getting back into reading, really enjoying reading a lot lately, and I'd never read a Stephen King book in my life. I'm going to be 33 in October, and in my 33 years on the planet, I'd never read a Stephen King book as much as I love horror. I love horror movies. I've always been a huge fan of horror, but I'd never read a Stephen King book, and so I've been really on the Stephen King train this year. I think I've read 7 of his books now, and Pet Sematary is one of my favorite books that I've read from Stephen King. And what's interesting about Pet Sematary, the book, is it's so much less a horror novel and so much more a novel about familial drama, about the uncertainty of parenting, about feeling like you're not necessarily ready to take on that role, and getting into the characters' headspaces, especially the father, Lewis Creed, getting into his head, taking a job on where he's working as a doctor. He sees really horrific things, and he has a lot of responsibility there, but how much different responsibility is at home when you're caring for your own children. And I think that element of parenting is really interesting in the book, in the way that it's examined. When Lewis Creed makes friends with Judd, their relationship together, Judd has obviously been alive for a really long time. He's had a lot of life experience, and their relationship in the book is really interesting. And so because the book is so fantastic, I was really excited to see the film, and unfortunately the film doesn't live up to the incredible novel in any way, shape, or form. It is a relatively faithful adaptation in moments. Stephen King wrote the screenplay to this movie, and so most of the beats in the film are very similar to the book, but the problem is they leave out in the film so much of the emotional crux, and the thing that really has you hooked in the novel is completely removed from the movie. It's so all over the place. You can tell the studio really wanted to hammer in, this is a horror film, and so because the book has horror elements but is much more of a family drama, they didn't approach it that way. Even the end of the movie, which is very different than the end of the book, you can tell it was very much a, hey, we have to add some horror element in here, otherwise audiences aren't going to like it as much, and it disappointed me a little bit, and I'll talk about it more when I break it down. So Pet Sematary, very simple story. Lewis Creed, his wife, his daughter, and his young son move into a house in the middle of the country off this road that there are constantly semi-trucks barreling down the road, and they quickly meet their neighbor Judd, who quickly becomes really close friends with Lewis, and they share stories together. He always comes over and spends time with the family, and you learn early on that there is a pet cemetery close to the property and that there's a ton of animals buried there. Well, early on you find out that there is a place beyond the cemetery that is a Native American burial ground, and through stories it has been told that you can bury an animal there and the animal will come back to life. And early on, as the plot description states, the family's cat Church dies while the wife and the 2 children are away for Thanksgiving. Lewis thinks his daughter will be absolutely shattered because he had a conversation with his daughter about death recently and she didn't take it very well. And so when Judd sort of recommends they go to this cemetery together, he's kind of reluctant at first, but he does it anyway, and Church shows back up again, but he's not normal. He's not acting the way he used to. to. He's very strange. He's doing things that is out of the ordinary. And obviously tragedy strikes the family, and when a person dies, Lewis has to decide whether or not he wants to take a gamble on burying that person in the cemetery. So it's a story that a lot of people know. Obviously, you've probably seen clips from this movie before. I'd seen a lot of the iconic imagery from it. And like I said, as far as an adaptation for a book goes, for the most part, it hits a lot of the same narrative beats. The problem is it strips away so much of the book that makes these connections to the characters so much more important. First and foremost, they removed the character of Judd's wife, which I thought was really strange because she plays such a pivotal role in the part of understanding death and grief and the family's feeling towards death, bringing apart those conversations. And in the film, they just add in this random character who's like doing laundry for the family and like cleaning for the family. You get so little time with her that like when she does die in the film, you don't really feel any sort of real connection to her for that same level of grief and trauma that the family is experiencing to resonate. The funeral scene is really quick. The conversations about it are really short. And that really took away from me. I feel like removing that character, despite how Stephen King was thinking you could streamline this to make it a quick hour and 40-minute long horror movie, it really removes something there. And also a lot of the initial conversations between Lewis and Judd, where they're really forming that relationship together, because Judd essentially becomes a father figure to Lewis in the book. And their conversations are so deep and interesting and thought-provoking, and listening to those conversations and understanding those characters makes the emotion throughout the film when things happen to both of their families and in their lives that much more impactful. And you don't get a lot of that in this movie because it feels like a very streamlined horror film. Let's get to the horror elements, which if you read Pet Sematary, the scary elements of the book don't really happen until about the halfway mark, and then the last like quarter of the book is really suspenseful and in your face, and really is most of the horror elements of the novel. Where in this, you can tell, like, for a general audience, a production company is going to be like, you need to have this in here, you need to have this in here, and it really makes it a less interesting experience. The performances in this movie are not very good all around. I would say the actor that plays Judd and then the actress that plays the wife are my two favorite performances in this film. I feel like they were both really committed. They did a really great job with the material that they were given. They still had some delivery that felt really cheesy and kind of out of the ordinary that I wasn't a huge fan of. The actor that plays Lewis does not do a great job in this movie. Some of his line delivery is downright hilarious with how bad it is. The young actor that plays Gage, the son, is not good whatsoever. His line delivery, it's like the most read off a piece of paper. Like, even when he's trying to be sinister with some of his dialogue, it doesn't work. It constantly, I had to suspend my disbelief. I was like, I'm not the biggest fan of the way these performances are coming across. When you're looking at a novel that even Stephen King himself says is less of a horror novel and more of a family drama, you're approaching it in completely the wrong way. And it really gets into like goofy schlock territory in the movie in the third act, like almost like the director tried to see how much ridiculous stuff they could get away with. There's a scene where Lewis wakes up in bed and has almost like a Three Stooges, like wakes up, smacks his head on the side of the countertop, like, whoa. And it's really funny when you watch it because you're like, this is supposed to be a really serious, grounded moment in the material, and you've added this weird, humorous element. I did like the incorporation of the side plot of the wife's sister, who when she was younger was going through a horrible illness. She had to watch her sister die, and I think the way that all of that is handled is it's done really well, but in context of the book, it plays a really large role, and with how quick it is in this film, it doesn't necessarily make sense in the entire through line of what the movie is trying to convey. I still like it, and because I'm a fan of the book, it made sense as to why it was in there, but as far as a general audience member who's watching the movie, it's probably not going to make a whole lot of sense why that plot arc was even included. And there's little bits and pieces here and there that I found myself appreciating, but for the most part, it was just a really big disappointment because it really kind of strayed away from exactly what the material is supposed to be, which is a family dealing with trauma and grief and trying to overcome those things and trying to, you know, come together to overcome when tragedy strikes. And I think that all those elements are handled so well by Stephen King in the book, and it makes for a really engaging an immersive experience, and the film just kind of falls flat in every way. Not to say that it's the worst thing I've ever seen. I definitely think it's worth watching if you read the book, just so that you can formulate those opinions in your own head. But I really was not a big fan of the movie. I feel like it fell short in a multitude of ways, but I would highly recommend checking out the book. So have you seen or read Pet Sematary? Do you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. As I said, the book is one of my favorite books that I've read this year, one of my favorites in King's catalog, and the movie is not very good. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.